You're watching Chilly Boy Productions. I'm Larry Chilly Boy Chillson, and this is my review for Queer. Now, before we get into this review, make sure to go ahead and click that subscribe button down below so that you can chill with me on each and every one of my latest videos. Queer is a 2024 romantic drama from director Luca Guadagnino, adapted from the novel of the same name written by William S. Burroughs. The film follows Lee, who recounts his time and life in Mexico City among expat American students, where he pursues a young man named Allerton, a U.S. serviceman recently discharged from Florida. The film stars Daniel Craig, Drew Starkey, Jason Schwartzman, Omar Apollo, and Leslie Manville. So, yeah, Queer was amongst my most anticipated films of all of 2024, and to put it frankly, anytime Luca Guadagnino is involved and we're going queer, and the film name is Queer, yeah, I'm gonna be really, really excited. Not to mention, I absolutely adored Challengers, his other film from 2024. So to get double the Luca in a single year? Yeah, we are so lucky. However, I have to admit, prior to viewing the film, I was pretty ignorant about the novel Queer, and it took me reading up on the novel itself and the events of the author after viewing the film to fully grasp everything I had just viewed. Because in honesty, I have to say, if you don't know the story of the author and what he went through in his life, this film definitely doesn't make sense as much and it doesn't hit as hard. So that's gonna be my caveat right off the bat. Because my experience viewing Queer was such an interesting ride. Watching the film, I was up and down, a little bit confused, a lot of bit confused, very amused, but I just could not stop thinking about it. Particularly the ending, the epilogue. I could not get out of my head. I couldn't stop thinking about this movie long after I viewed it. So while I didn't love everything about Queer, it is one of those films that is going to stick with me for some time. It's simply on that merit. I have to say, I definitely am recommending Queer, and it's certainly going to be pretty high on my year-end list. One of the films that actually impacted me from 2024. So, let's go ahead and talk about the positives with Queer. Well, my biggest positive is actually Daniel Craig. I think he's fantastic as Lee. He really toes this line of a person that you empathize for, that you understand. You feel this longing, this sadness, this loneliness through Daniel Craig. But also, you feel a lot of frustration towards him. You understand the want to push this person away as well. You get annoyed with Lee, but you're never done with Lee. You never want to just toss him to the side and say, "Get out of my life." And Daniel Craig really exemplifies that so beautifully well. He creates a real person within this film. A beautiful performance from him. Honestly, it might be the best performance I've ever seen from Daniel Craig. I also think Drew Starkey is fantastic in this film. He is a dream. They styled him to the heavens. Of course, you understand why Lee is just constantly puppy dog eyeing around this boy. He's beautiful. And at times, I think it's a little underplayed. He plays it very close to the chest, but I think that has more to do with the script than the performance because I do think Starkey, particularly when he has to open up in that third act and really give it to us, the audience, he's fantastic. Now, I'll talk about the other cast members momentarily because I'm a little bit more mixed on those. But our main two couple are fantastic. I loved Omar Apollo. Obviously, he's not a seasoned actor by any means, but I think he does perfectly fine in the role he's given. We get lots of eye candy for sure. Even if they try to make it less eye candy. No, it's eye candy. And it's a Luca Guadagnino film. So, visually, the film itself is eye candy. He knows how to direct a sexy, sensual film like very few other directors know how. He gives you what you want. He never is afraid of showing you the sexuality between men, but it's also never gross or exploitative. It's always very sensual. You feel like you're intruding on something. I think it's always just beautifully done. So, yes, we have skin, we have sweatiness, we have actual sexual acts happening, but it's done in such a beautifully high art way. It's hard to even capture how stunning he brings that to screen. It's really amazing. But in general, the cinematography is absolutely gorgeous. The direction itself is very strong. I don't think it's quite Challenger strong, but Luca is always on his game. And that was evident here as well. I really enjoyed the editing of this film. It is not like the other Luca Guadagnino films. I would say it's closest to maybe Suspiria in the actual editor's room and the way that Luca guided them to piece it all together, but it's very different and very wild. But there were some beautifully done artistic choices to represent more metaphorical aspects to the story that I loved. Obviously, the settings are also gorgeous. It's a Luca Guadagnino film. It's going to be stunning. Reznor and Atticus Ross are back to do the score. That's amazing. As per usual, you can always count on them to deliver, and they do once again. But again, just not quite as good as the other score they did for Luca in Challengers. But I think the film works so well for such a long time. In the first two acts of the story, we're really building up something very interesting. I think the third act is, nah, we'll talk about that in the negatives. And then this epilogue really kind of hits you with a gut punch. And Luca Guadagnino, damn it, he knows how to end a movie. The last epilogue is really just, I mean, mind blowing to me. It's honestly awards worthy on its own. In its own right, that epilogue is just so fantastic in a nutshell and perfectly encapsulates all of the emotional needs you feel by the end of this film while also leaving it wide open. It's a movie that doesn't really give you answers, which is fitting because Queer the book is an unfinished book. And yet it gave me a really quite solemn, actually, but definitive emotional conclusion. I knew this review would be a little bit difficult because I was already struggling to really collect everything I thought and put it into words. I need a second viewing, certainly, of this film immediately, to be honest. While I don't think it's perfect, I need to see it and dissect so much of it yet again. So then, what did not work so well when it comes to Queer? Well, let's talk about those cast members. I don't think Jason Schwartzman is bad in the film. I just think some of these extra characters, these other gays roaming around Mexico City, mm, are a little bit caricature in ways, a little bit over the top in makeup and appearance. And Jason Schwartzman never really settled into what I needed. He has a great scene, actually, once again, in the epilogue of the film, but through the rest of it, I was kind of like, oh, all right, I don't know. It's a little bit much. And then that's exemplified when we get to Leslie Manville's character. I just didn't really appreciate her character overall. I think the film would have been better without her in it, to be honest. And that's a damn shame because Leslie Manville is a fantastic actor and can bring anything to life. I just think this character was already a bit too much. The way they styled her and brought her to visual identity didn't work for me. The way she was acted didn't work for me. Nothing about the character worked for me. And that's really where most all of my problems in Queer lie, is the third act, the third chapter. This does the lovely chapters with the title cards, and this one really felt like it didn't need, I don't know. I didn't need introductions to what we were doing with those acts, but okay. Once we get to South America and go to this rainforest, it's really falls off the rails in a pretty dramatic way. It feels like a huge detour, and it made more sense after doing research because a lot of that was made up for the film. They had to embellish it because we end before that. They don't find the stuff they're finding in the film in the novel. So once I read that, it made a lot of sense that we went off into a very weird direction. One aspect of it really works well. There's something about telepathy and two of our characters becoming one in a way, and the way that it's done visually, the way that it happens just as an art form was stunning and pretty transformative, honestly. I just think we could have done that maybe in the city in South America rather than going up into the rainforest. Because everything else that happens up there, I just didn't like, and I was like, what is this weird side quest? Also, there's a wild transition that goes from chapter 3 to epilogue that I was like, Luca, what are we doing? But also, when it comes to Allerton, Drew Starkey's character, I know it's a choice, and I know it's very purposeful, but particularly in the first two acts while we're in Mexico, I think they had him play it a little bit too straightforward and cold. Because particularly with Luca and his mission for this film was to be this romance, I think it would have been more fulfilled in that purpose if we had been able to be let in more, particularly from Allerton's side of things. As it is, this feels much more like a sorrowful romance, which is my favorite kind of romance. Probably why I enjoyed it and particularly love that ending. It's a very bittersweet everything to this film has that bitter sweetness to it that I love. But I think even the ending, you could have maintained this really heavy heart, this beauty and darkness, with giving us just a little bit more from Allerton's side. I think that would have went a long way. But overall, I really, really do appreciate and enjoy what we are brought to the table. I think that third chapter really does the rest of the film quite a disservice, unfortunately, because the first two acts, that epilogue, are damn near perfection in most every way. There's so much symbolism. They bring in William S. Burroughs' real life outside of what he wrote in his own pages, which is already apparently very autobiographical, and incorporate it into this story in a way that works, in a way that fits. It's just that third act that really kind of takes you for a loop. So honestly, if you're not into art house films, I'm not sure you're going to find a lot about Queer to Love. If you're not part of the queer community, I'm not sure you're going to latch on to a lot of the thematic material that's just woven into the very fabric of the film itself and works its way through some of this kind of crazy language, a lot of this visual representation, these metaphors that are taking place for your eyes. I'm not sure a lot of that is going to connect with you. So if you're not part of the queer community, I'm not sure how much you're going to gain from this film, in honesty. And I think that third act specifically will just take you all the way out and you won't enjoy yourself. However, if you're a fan of Luca Guadagnino, I think this really feels at home in his filmography. It is daring, it's beautifully crafted, it takes some big swings and some big risks, but it's a worthy ride and one that personally left me really emotionally invested, emotionally taken aback, and has had me thinking about it ever since I watched it and ready to go back in for another viewing. So that was my review for Queer. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead, click that like button down below and subscribe to the channel so that you are always up to date on all of my latest videos. Also, join in on the discussion. Are you excited to see Queer? And what is your favorite Luca Guadagnino film? Let me know either in that comment section down below, or you can hit me up over on that blue sky. And let's kick off the discussion. I love you all so much for your continued support. Mwah! Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.